Welcome to the Mac and Fish podcast. Our host, McKinley Roll, is on the bench. Filling in for Coach Roll is Charles, aka Fish By. Our co-host will be Corey Long of WalterFootball.com. In segment 1 of the College Football Weekend Roundup, we're going to discuss the University of Florida football program. In segment 2, we're going to discuss the Florida State Seminoles. In segment 3, we're going to discuss the University of Miami football Hurricanes. In our last segment, we're going to discuss UCF, who just lost their head football coach Josh Heupel, who will be some of the main targets for the Golden Knights. Well, we're back. This is the Mac and Fish podcast. Once again, Mac will be on the bench, and we've got our great co-host that fills in, it seems like every week now, Corey Long. How are you doing, Corey?
I'm doing well. Good to be on the Fish podcast. I'm calling it the Fish podcast.
All right. Hey, listen, I'm just happy to be back.
Yeah, I know.
I've been on quarantine for the last 2 weeks. For those people out there that say this thing's like the flu, they're full of so you can leave that out there. That's not true. I mean, when you wake up with sore legs and you can't walk at all, it's more than just a flu. So,
it's like the flu, but also if you have a gunshot wound. I think, that's really what it comes down to.
Oh man, I'm just glad that I'm on the other side of this thing, and I got to tell you, I definitely don't want to ever quarantine again, not without a helmet on. All right.
I don't blame you. That's right.
But we've got a great show today, and there's been the fact that college football ended a few weeks ago. It's never ends the season. I remember when we were growing up, there'd be that like 3 or 4 or 5 month lull. And the college football off season seemed like so long, and now it's like we'd have they did start back up with the 7-on-7 events, but there's no off season anymore. It's you get to this point that now like the coaching changes. We've had coaching changes. Look, UCF signs a class, and now we're going to discuss it later on. Josh Heupel. All of a sudden, his athletic director gets taken away to Tennessee, and he goes with them. And UCF now is open, and it just seems like this coaching carousel just continues forever. Like there's no end. When's a coach going to get fired in like May or take another job in May? It's probably the best time to actually find a coach would be in May, because you've already done your recruiting for that year. It's probably would be the most convenient time.
And here's the funny thing, Charles. Remember, we've got FCS football starting in 2 weeks.
I know. I talked to Eastern Kentucky, and when he was like, "Yeah, we're on the practice field," I totally forgot they're going to have college football.
And you know what's so great about that is that we're going to see FCS kids that are going to be trying to level up and play in September for FBS programs. Like, it's going to be the most craziest season, because you've seen some kids like the Virginia Tech quarterback that's going to North Dakota State that can play right away. Some players are they're going to go down, play, and try to flip their way back up. It's like flipping a house, but only with football players.
Could FCS like fluke his way itself into some luck and then go, you know what? This spring football works for us?
Yeah, it doesn't work for the XFL, but it works for the FCS.
Because you got to figure people will want to watch football. It's
authentic football. It's not going anywhere. It's not reliant on, a bunch of TV like ESPN's going to show a bunch of these games. I know they are. Like, you're not going to just let all these games happen and not be like, well, we can show about 6 of them this week.
Listen, I filmed a semi-pro game yesterday, all right? And I think ESPN was there. Like, football, they will sell football, honestly. And that was some bad football. Dude, I got to tell you, man, semi-pro football, hey, I'm glad they pay me, and the guy does pay me on time. I wish the high schools were the same way. But I wish there was I'd film like every semi-pro team, because those guys pay that day.
I remember I remember you were going to get me to film a semi-program, and I was doing some research, looking them up. I'm like, Charles, I think they play at a parking lot. He's like, you're like, I know. I'm like, no, literally, I think they literally play in a parking lot. They just play a padded football on concrete.
These guys play at like honestly a Pop Warner field, so it doesn't matter. Like, I mean, like I see one guy like walking over to the sideline. He keeps talking to his wife. I'm like, this thing's a train wreck. But it was entertaining. There's some guys out there that probably just got out of the joint. So it doesn't. Some of them guys have rap sheets.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And not because they're rappers.
Yeah, no.
Oh man, but I'm excited. We got honestly, I think we got an interesting show today. We're going to talk about FSU and Miami, the transfers and the transfer portal. We've had some coaching changes. Tavares Robinson, who we know very well, is now on the University of Miami staff. It's one thing about Manny is like, I think he's fooled people. Like Manny's an assassin. That first year, he got rid of his whole offensive staff, and now he got rid of his defensive staff. Like these guys, they don't get time to like, hey, we're gonna develop or we're gonna build culture. He's like, listen, this shit ain't working. We gotta move.
I don't give him credit for that. I think one of the most overrated things is coaching stability, because if your team is worth anything, you might lose 3-4 coaches every season because other schools are going to try to give them opportunities. I mean, Alabama lost their OC, gets the head coaching job at Georgia. Their running backs coach gets the head coaching job at Marshall. The O-line coach goes to Texas with Sarkisian. So they lose 3 major positions. Only thing he does is hire Bill O'Brien, an NFL coaches won a playoff game.
Yeah.
Hey, you might do OC now.
It may not have worked at Houston, but like you're going to get a head coach to run your offense. I mean, yeah, that's how you know Alabama is just at a different level. And I sent you an email this week to confirm why Alabama is so good. Why are they so good? You want to tell the audience why they're so good?
We're looking at this thing, and you're like, we're trying to go through these different schools with it. Well, they're just going. Alabama's just hitting one every year in recruiting. They're like on a 7 or 8 year run. I think. Maybe them in Georgia flipped one year, them in Florida State flipped in like 2012, but they're either 1 most of the time or 2 on a rare occasion.
Can we like sneak like Nick Saban into the casino? Like, I mean, this guy rolls nothing but winners. Like, like he just every class is, and like fans, we hear it all the time. The fans on the message board, oh, rankings don't matter. They matter to Alabama because they're number 1 every year and they keep winning.
Done well with that. Alabama seemed to have done well with those rankings. Somehow they managed to have a top recruiting class every year, and they're either playing in or winning the championship game.
It's like either them or Ohio State, and you say, oh, they got to play their way out. Now I know why you say that. Like you look at the rankings, it's demoralizing. Like the only reason their classes aren't ranked 1 is because I think the recruiting rankings and networks are like behind Clemson. Like they never thought they'd get this good. Now watch, they'll have like a top 5 class every year.
And the interesting thing, and we'll go with the two, just an example, the 2014 one, the first one, which was FSU, Alabama, Ohio State, and Oregon. It was so interesting to look at, and there were 2 areas that caught my attention. One is that Marcus Mariota was really I think ESPN had as a 2-star. The other 3 sites had him as a low end 3-star kid, and their classes was still in the top 20. So if Mariota would have gotten the mid-level, high-end 4-star rating that he deserved and the 5-star rating that he played himself up to, that Oregon class probably would have been a top 10, top 12 class based on that alone. So it's like even when the class was a little low, it was generally because one major player in the class just happened to pan out so extremely well. And if we could re-rank that class would be a lot higher. And with Ohio State, what I looked at is they were recruiting good under Jim Tressel. Tressel was always good at getting a couple of really marquee players and then filling the roster with guys that really he could mesh with his coaching style. But when Urban Meyer got there, they leveled up they went from basically being a good recruiting school to elite in no time. Like it's just,
Nah, they went to, it's like that. You saw them class rankings 10, 12, 2,
two,
1,
one,
2, 3,
two,
4,
three.
3.
Yeah.
Like they started hitting every note on the guitar. Like they didn't miss. Like Urban was going into Florida taking top players. He's going into Texas taking top players. I mean, heck, he went into Missouri and got Ezekiel. He just,
Yeah.
and the fans talk about this, and we've discussed it over and over. Rankings matter. I mean, the one thing you noticed when you looked at those notes, and you could go over it again, is you had to have at least a top 15 class to be in the Final Four. Like that was a prerequisite. Like there weren't, outside of Michigan State, all of the years that the playoffs have happened, I think Michigan State and Washington were the only two teams that were outliers.
Yeah.
But Michigan State was another one. We talked about it. They do a very good job of finding the players. D'Antonio did, of fitting their system. The Le'Veon Bell types, those guys that were really good, and that's why. Plus, they were in the Big Ten a lot of those years before Meyer got there, and Ohio State wasn't suffocating the rest of the conference. But it shows you that we've discussed it. Like when FSU, Miami, and Florida are good, their recruiting rankings are in the top 5. And
I mean, when you look at like that Michigan State team, you look at the roster. It was a very good roster. I mean, Connor Cook ended up playing in the NFL for a while. You had tons of players at the next level. Like Aaron Burbridge ended up playing in the NFL for a while. He was a big time recruit, I remember. Malik McDowell was a big time kid. Like they had some big time kids speckled in, and they just happened to hit on all of their depth kids. They had kids that we knew. McGarrett Kings Jr., you remember him? He was out of
very good at university school. He was a very good slot receiver. They hit on him. They had Kirk Cousins, who they hit on. They've hit on. They do very good up front on the O line and D line. That's where you win a lot of ball games. They give you a chance. And they recruited the positions, the most important positions, really well. We've talked about it with Clemson. Clemson doesn't sign 25 elite kids like Alabama or Ohio State, but what Clemson does in their recruiting classes, they know quarterback, they know offensive tackle, they know D line, and corner are the most important positions. And if you notice, that's where they sign their 5 and high 4-star kids. They'll sign 3 linebackers that are just probably 3-star kids that they know are system guys that, if the D line's really good, they can protect those guys. But that's why they've had so much success recruiting, is because they've hit at those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit at the major positions that the game changers make a difference. You get a game changer quarterback, that makes a difference. You get game changers that on the defensive line. When you're winning battles at the line of scrimmage and you've got the best quarterback on the field, I'm gonna think you're gonna win 10 games without thinking too hard. And I mean, and that's what happens. So it was really interesting to look at that and look at how Alabama's they wreck recruiting. I mean, you know what? No one's going to hit on every recruit. For the most part, we always say if you hit on 70% of a class, you're doing good. In Alabama's case, they hit on 70% of all the elite kids they get. Like that's what puts them a step above. When every position is elite, you can hit on 70%. You don't worry about the 30% that you miss out on.
I mean, Mac Jones was a 3-star kid that played in a wing tee at Bowles, and they took a flyer on him as a backup quarterback.
And he finishes top 5 in the Heisman Trophy.
It's insane. People could say, oh, they do this, they do that, they have so many people on their staff. Listen, you still, at the end of the day, you could have 8,000 people working for you, but you still got to evaluate and find the right guys. They're not doing this by luck. They're doing it because they grind really hard and find the guys that are really good football players and find a lot of them.
Case in point to that would be Miami in the early 2000s. Butch Jones builds this great roster.
Butch Davis, but it's okay.
Butch Davis, excuse me. Butch Davis went, we were talking about Butch Jones earlier. Butch Davis went, they almost went in 2000. They went in 2001 under Coker. Then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to go to Miami. and they just did not have the good evaluators of talent to sift through. And they still got great players, but they got a lot more guys that didn't pan out because they didn't do a good job of sifting through everybody to figure out who are the guys that are going to keep us at the championship level. Everybody, all the top kids want to go to Alabama. You look at that Rivals 250, all 250 of those kids want to go to Alabama. They have to sift through and find the 24 or 25 that they know will keep them at a championship level. That's the hard part.
Well, I think they don't get lazy. They still do the same thing year in and year out. And I think that's where Miami, Florida State in the past, when they're at the top, or you see a lot of programs, it's easy to go, all right, well, this kid's a 5-star, let's just recruit him. And then you find out maybe the kid can't play that well. I remember Miami signed a kid out of Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, a 5-star D lineman. And the kid got to Miami, and it wasn't that he wasn't talented. He just didn't fit in. He could not adapt to the city of Miami. He probably would have done really well in the Big Ten, but Alabama finds guys that can fit into their school, fit in their program, understand it's like they have all these requirements and they hit on every single one of those when they're recruiting guys.
Yeah. It's always business there. And I can do nothing but really respect how they handle it. I really do love how they handle their business.
No doubt. Well, that was a great segment, guys. And we'll be back for segment number 2. And we'll be back on the other side. In segment 1 of the College Football Weekend Roundup, we're going to discuss the University of Florida football program.
Well, yeah, we're back. And you know what? We're going to talk about the Florida Gators, and we're talking about transfer classes today. We're going to start off with the Florida Gators, who so far have brought in 5 transfers. The big names up there, one was a transfer they got several months ago, running back DeMarcus Bowman, one of the top running backs in the class of 2020, who spent a very short period of time at Clemson before deciding to transfer back. And the second one they got more recently, arguably the top tight end in the class of 2020, Eric Gilbert, who decided to go, who was at LSU this past year, didn't seem to like it. So he's going to Florida now. He decided to pick Florida over Georgia. And he'll, presumably, you assume that he's going to want to replace Kyle Pitts.
Well, Eric Gilbert had a great freshman season at LSU, and we were all big fans of Kyle Pitts this year. And the one thing that Gilbert does is it allows them now to take the 2 talented freshmen they signed in this year's class and not rush them. Tight ends have a lot more to do than just catch the ball. They help out in blocking schemes. There's a lot more involvement for them, and it's tough for freshmen to come in and start right away. So Gilbert, already being through the whole freshman year and the grind of the SEC, this is a phenomenal get. I mean, everybody's like, oh, they're going to miss Pitts. They're not going to miss Pitts. Yeah, I mean, they just went from one first rounder to potentially another.
Yeah, you're talking all of 6'5", about 255 pounds, runs a 4.5. You now start to see where Florida's next offense is going to look like. I think it's going to be a lot more run-based, a lot more multiple tight end sets. They've got some, they got 2 that they brought on campus. They got another one named Keon Zipperer, who's been there for a couple of years, was a Lakeland High kid. So you can start to see that they're going to be running multiple tight end sets. And then they're going to get back to more of a running game, but they've got several different backs. They know they're breaking in a new quarterback. They're not going to be the up and downfield passing team that they were this past year. I don't think they've got the receiver talent, but now you see you're strong at the tight end position. You're pretty strong at running back. There's a lot of things that they can do with their offense, and you quickly see in the transformation. So I think for them, I think this is Bowman and Gilbert together really transform what they're going to do offensively if both of those guys work out.
And we talked about it. The one problem that Florida had, and it hurts the defense too, is they weren't able to run the football last year. And the one thing Mullen has been able to do, whether it was with Tebow or he had Dak Prescott and Ryan Fitzgerald over at Mississippi State, the one thing they did, especially with the quarterbacks, he likes to run the quarterbacks. Emory Jones is probably a more natural runner than Trask, even though Trask could run a little bit. That he was more of a passer. He could now go to those 2 and 3 tight end sets, pound the football, control the ball, and he's going to pound the football with guys that can break long runs. I mean, we've seen DeMarcus Bowman. DeMarcus Bowman's not a pound and ground type running back. This is a kid that if he gets a seam, he could go 70. And they will now have the big play in their run game, where maybe last year they were so pass heavy that I think at the end of the year they started to become predictable, and teams were able to key on them and you saw it later in the year, they just weren't as effective offensively as they were once Pitts was gone and that ability. But I like what they're doing. I think if the quarterback position gets figured out, which I believe Mullen is probably one of the best quarterback coaches in the country, he'll figure it out. They're going to be a very good team on offense once again. I think people that sit there and go, oh, well, they're losing all these guys. They've got weapons. And,
we got weapons.
This is going to be a very good Florida team. And, you look at, they are also fixing some of the other problems. You look at the defense, they're bringing in 2 defensive tackles that have played a lot of snaps. The Antonio Shelton kid from Penn State and Daquan Newkirk. Newkirk was at Auburn, played a lot. He was he originally, the first time I saw Daquan Newkirk, he was at Jones or Evans High School. And then I think he played at Foundation Academy. He played at a small school. So he kind of got overlooked. He's a big, strong body kid. These are both guys that are going to help solidify them up front, especially against the run. Florida struggled last year at stopping the run at times. Now you add these 2 guys. You have Gervin Dexter coming back. Now that not only do they have talent, they have some depth, so they can roll in bodies inside that maybe they couldn't do last year.
Yeah, what I think this allows them to do, you get 2 fifth-year, 2 graduate transfer guys, both 6'3"-ish, both well over the 310, 315-pound range. It gives you some flexibility with a talent like Dexter, a kid that you can play at 3 technique. You can line him up on the edge. Even though he's a big kid, he's so tall and long, you occasionally want to see him out there on the edge. So, now that you've got some big space eaters in the middle, it allows you to use this very unique, talented defensive line piece and give them some different looks and better chances to be successful. Last year, they were relying on him a little bit too much to play 1 technique, to play 3 technique, and it didn't fit him. He's a kid. He's a quick twitch athletic kid that needs to be in positions where he can get after the passer.
No doubt. So, well, I think they did a pretty good job. What do you think, Florida is, going to lose a very good coach, I believe, to the Eagles or one of the pro teams. How much of a loss is that? He was quickly rising up the ranks as one of the top coordinators. There was talk about him potentially being a head coaching candidate. What's the loss of Coach Johnson with the Florida Gators?
I think it's definitely substantial. I think, the one thing he did was he gave Mullen an opportunity to be more of a CEO because he could trust Brian Johnson with the quarterbacks. He could trust him to do a lot of the issues with the offensive, being the offensive coordinator. He could handle meetings. He could handle game planning. He took a lot off of Dan Mullen's shoulders, and I think Mullen's going to have to take on more of a hands-on role this year. So, yeah, I think it definitely makes a difference. I think it makes a huge difference. Garrett McGee, I like him. I think he could eventually be, that sort of a coach from Mullen, but it's not going to happen next year. So I think you're going to see more of a hands-on Dan Mullen, especially with the quarterbacks, because you got 2 guys that are going to be battling for that position with Emory Jones and Richardson. So both of those guys are going to be. So both of those guys, he's going to have to be really hands-on with both of those guys now. And before that, I think he would have been able to trust Brian Johnson to handle a lot of that.
Well, there's your Florida Gator talk. We went over pretty much all the subjects of what's happened to them the last couple weeks, and we'll discuss them more in the future. Our next segment, we're going to dive into Florida State. They've had a very entertaining offseason after a season that wasn't very good, and hopefully Corey Long will behave himself on the other side of this. And
What are you talking about? I'm always behaving myself. We'll be fine. We'll be fine.
All right. Well, I'll see you back on the other side. In segment 2, we're going to discuss the Florida State Seminoles.
All right. Yeah. So we're back. Now we're discussing the transfers that came in at Florida State. The Florida State took a really small class in the early signing period with the promise that they were going to be looking for a large transfer group, upward of 10. So far, they've got 8, and they're at different levels. They go from having a couple of graduate transfers to some young guys that they're going to have for a few years. They went heavy at the cornerback position. They brought in a new quarterback in Mackenzie Milton, who we've discussed previously. You know, they're looking to fill a lot of holes, and they're hoping that this group can do it. I know I've got mixed feelings about it. I'm higher on some guys than other. What do you think, Fish?
You know, listen, anytime you come off a 3-win season, especially at a school like Florida State, you have to lay the hammer down. And I mean, they took a hammer. I mean, if this was like one of those rebuild shows that my wife likes to watch on HGTV, I mean, this is like they destroyed the house. Like there's the bulldozer came and they're putting the scraps in the garbage can and they're rebuilt. This is a total rebuild. And, you know, part of that, you know, they did sign a very small class, and part of that was we knew talking to certain sources that they were going to go heavy grad transfer. We knew this. Like I heard the low end number was like 8, 9. You know, like that was their expectation, and they may not be done. I mean,
I don't think
you know, I think spring football, if you're on that roster and you're 4th or 5th on that depth chart, you may be looking at that transfer portal real as a friend of yours, you know, and I think overall they did a pretty, you know, the number one thing they needed to get a quarterback. We've discussed it. Like, we're not huge fans of what they have on that roster right now. I mean, yeah, we both like Jordan Travis, and let's be real. I mean, he's their best quarterback, but he also can't run the ball 20 times a game in the first half of a game and survive, let alone a season, a game. That's what happened to him this year. But getting Mackenzie Milton is a huge get, and I think it was the first major win of this coaching staff because it's the most important position in college football. It's the most important position in high school football. It's the most important, like the days of, I don't want to say it, but the days of winning, even with like a Marcus Alston or a Thad Busby, or those days are done. Like you can't win. You can't just go, oh, we're going to be more talented than everybody else, but we're going to have a C- quarterback. It just doesn't work.
And Georgia has found that out. You know, they really found that out this year, that no matter how good that roster was, it wasn't good enough to make up for Stetson Bennett IV trotting out there, not being able to throw a pass more than 10 yards.
Yeah, they convinced a 5-star quarterback to just commit to him. So you know, like, how important that position is.
Exactly. So, yeah, you know, we both like Travis. I think Travis basically saved their season. I mean, I don't know if they'd have won a game if he didn't exist. We're neither one of us are that high on the other two guys. I don't think Rodemaker can play. I just don't think. I think eventually he's going to be on his way out. I think after they recruit whatever they recruit in this class of quarterbacks, he's going to be the odd man out. Purdy, you know, you talk to 10 different people, you get 10 different opinions. I'm of the opinion that I think he's a little below average. So they needed Milton because, like you said, Travis, as good as he is, you know, his style of play isn't conducive to playing a full season. So they need a guy that I think, you know, Milton coming off of his injuries, Yeah, it's a risk, but I think he'll be careful. What really interests me about this group are three guys. Jermaine Johnson, the edge player they got from Georgia, who has put up decent numbers in a reserve role and is really looking for an opportunity to play, you know, 70-80% of the defensive snaps as a starter. And the two veteran cornerbacks that they got, the McClellan kid from Arkansas and the Moore kid from UCF. The reason they interest me is because to me, this is a prove it season for a lot of that defensive staff, and especially defensive coordinator Adam Fuller. Last year he could say that they weren't his guys, that they didn't fit what he wanted to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We saw Janarius Robinson yesterday get 2 sacks in the Senior Bowl, so maybe coaching didn't really do him justice this year, to be honest with you. But now they got guys that they picked these guys. Adam Fuller went out heavily to get McClellan and Moore, believing that he needed help with boundary corner. To me, Moore hasn't played in 2 years. That's a risk. McClellan I think he's 23 or 24. He hasn't played in a while. These are risky picks, but these are guys that he wants. And to Mike Norvell's credit, he's going to let him live or die with the guys that he wants. But if he can get production out of those three guys, that's on him now.
Yeah, I think though that those guys, I don't expect a whole lot of these DBs, just because I think Florida State, that's the one position that they're not like. I think they're very talented in the back end. They got talent there. I mean, Demore Tate's coming in. You still got Akeem Dent. You got Travis Jay. I think the one thing that these guys bring, other than depth, is they bring that competition. And I think that that's one thing that at Florida State they've had, is that guys have felt entitled that they're owed positions, whether it was Blackman or whatever. And it's so important to have competition. We've talked about it. Even if McKenzie Milton doesn't get to 100% and he's not the greatest, the worst case scenario, he pushes Purdy to work just as hard to become a good quarterback at FSU, or somebody that they could put out there and he could be productive enough that you could win ball games. Like you got to have competition. What made Florida State so good when they were winning, or Miami so good, or Florida, is that there's 2-3 guys fighting for that one spot. Hey, listen, there's a lot of DBs out there, but these guys have a chip on their shoulder. Brandon Moore, Jamie Robinson, also McClellan. But there's guys on that roster that are talented that need to be pushed. I mean, Akeem Dent Akeem Dent didn't forget how to play football.
Yeah,
he's a very talented, one of the best players to come out of Palm Beach in the last 10 years. He needs a kick in the pants. Like, he needs to fight for his spot, and that's going to make him better on the field, And I think that's a big thing with a lot of these guys. A lot of these guys are basically, they didn't start Keir Thomas didn't start at South Carolina. But he understands his role. He understands that, hey, listen, I'm going to be in there for 15, 20 plays. I got to make those plays count.
And I understand what you're saying. Here's my issue. Now, and I don't put Robinson with the other two. You now listed 3 guys. You're talking McClellan, Moore, and Thomas. But you gave scholarships now. Granted, they're all 1-year players that you're not expecting to make much of an impact on the field. We're expecting Johnson. Johnson has to make an impact for them to be good. He has to get sacks. I think Robinson's a very good player they got out of South Carolina that can do a lot of things for them. They're not in a position to be giving away scholarships to guys that come in there and just, and be on the sidelines. They need guys that can come in there and make a difference. These aren't those 3 guys aren't difference makers, in my opinion.
Well, we've discussed
They're not good enough. They were giving up 40 points a game last year.
Yeah, listen, the reality is they've got to get 7-8 wins this year. And if these guys can help them get to that 7-8 wins, they need that, because the 2022 class is going to make or break everything with Florida State the next 3 years. It's such an important class. So that's the thing is, yeah, these guys ain't going to help them win the ACC. They're not going to help them win the Atlantic. And they're probably going to end up at the Gasparilla Bowl in December of next year. But they need guys. They lost so much. And they just need some production. I mean, like these guys have to do something on the field. They can't be just dead bodies. I do think, like I said, I think Mackenzie Milton, I think Jermaine Johnson, I think Jimmy Robinson. Those three I feel will make an impact. Those three. Those three. The other guys are they're basically, like I said,
they need on offense. They need Parchment to be much better than he was last year. Now, 2 years ago at Kansas, he was good. Last year, the quarterback situation at Kansas wasn't good.
What does he need? 40, 50 catches this year? I mean, would that be a good, 40,
I think that
40 catches for 750, maybe 6 touchdowns? I mean,
because they need a receiver that's able to step up. My worry with Parchment is last year he was just lazy. I mean, I get it. Kansas's quarterback situation was horrible. That was a bad team.
It's not a good thing if you're saying you need to change culture, because that's the whole thing at Florida State right now. Yeah. We're trying to change culture. Well, this kid's lazy. It's not
hard for Kansas last year and worked hard. He didn't even show up for half their game. I mean, he was out there on the field. He wasn't out there,
That's another position, though. Florida State has so-called talent, whether it's Jordan Young, Brian Robinson, Portier. Somebody in that group needs to step up. They need somebody to step up and become that number one guy. Brian Robinson was a guy that SEC schools were after. Miami was at. He's not. People forget about guys after 1 year. It's easy when they don't produce. And Jordan Young had one of the best high school highlight films, and he's flashed here and there, but hasn't done it. They need these guys to step up. Parchment needs to be a piece of the puzzle. We already know he's not probably going to be the number one guy, but that's the problem. They need him to be, and that's the position they're in right now.
Yeah, Keyshawn Helton, another kid that's got to play more next year.
Yeah, Keyshawn needs to come back. Keyshawn needs to be what he was as a freshman and most of his sophomore year before his injury.
And the final position was the running back. They got from Auburn. They basically flipped LaDamian Webb into PJ Williams. So it seems like a 3-year younger version of LaDamian Webb.
I got in arguments with people on message boards. They basically acted like LaDamian Webb was. You would have thought he was better than Dalvin Cook. I never saw it. He had moments where he ran well. Well, heck, that's running.
He's a running back.
I didn't expect for him to run for 250 yards. You would have thought this kid was the second coming of frickin' Walter Payton with the arguments I got it.
He had one 100-yard game against North Carolina where I thought he ran hard. I thought he played well. I thought, in general, he was productive as a part of the, as a part of a rotational guy. He come and he blocked a little. He ran hard when you asked him to. Not much of a pass catcher. Not very explosive, but he did the best he could. And believe me, if he was the next Dalvin Cook, he wouldn't have been transferring to Troy. All right, so let's get that out of the way.
DJ, it's crazy. You hear all these things. DJ's related to Edgerrin James. I guess that's a plus because he is.
Yeah, he did. I'll put it to you this way: given their running back situation, it was. I know they were looking at the Hargrove kid out of Louisiana who ended up committing to Mississippi State. I think the Williams kid is a little better, but again, neither one of those guys blew me away. So
would you rather have Eric Gray? Is that his name? Eric Gray, the running back at 10? Is there another option out there?
I'd rather have Eric Gray. I'd rather have the kid that's transferring from Buffalo, to be honest with you. I think that's a stud.
Yeah.
I'd rather have the kid that the Ingram kid that ended up, I think he went to USC maybe.
Right.
Yeah, there's To me, I think they went way too early on running backs. I think they really could have waited that.
They didn't really need. It's not like running backs a major need for them. They got a lot of young kids.
Yeah, and you know what? Recruit a running back. There's 8 million of them coming out in high school.
Yeah, it's
not a position. To me, that's a waste of a transfer scholarship. You don't need running. If you can't recruit running backs, you shouldn't be coaching.
No, I agree. I definitely there's just running backs grow on trees in the state of Florida. And you see it. How many times are you watching a MAC game and they're like, hey, so-and-so has 150 yards. You're like, you look the kid up and he's like
Oh
from
yeah.
Sebring or
Yeah, he
freaking,
went to, he went to
Tampa
Port
Tech.
Orange. You just don't know where they come
I mean, look, I mean, the San Francisco 49ers, they had two of them, Matt Breida, who
from.
played at Nature Coast, and they also
Yeah.
had the running back from New Smyrna Beach. Like, these kids grow on trees in the state.
Yeah.
Like, there's some guy out there that could come back to Florida State. They can find these guys, but there's no doubt, listen, we've discussed this ad nauseum. Florida State, this is a transition year. This is a year two. We expect a major jump from 3 wins to, with McKenzie Milton. Like I said, I think 7-8 wins is that shows you that, hey, the program's turning the corner. And it helps you. They, recruiting wise, it will give them a big shot in the arm. Like, they've gotten off to a very good start for 2022. Like, their class, I like their 2022 class right now. I couldn't say that last year. I wasn't like they were getting guys and I wasn't excited, but I like the Aaron Hester kid they just got.
Yeah.
I think that, they got the Kelly kid out of Dillard. He's not a 3-star kid. If they pull in Marvin Jones Jr., they have one of the best DN classes they've had since like Peter Boulware and Raynor Wilson came in. Like, they haven't done that in a long time. So there are some positive signs, but they need the product on the field to flip, and they need to start landing. We've talked about, they got to start landing better players. I don't care what scheme you run. I don't care how you can have the 10 best coaches in college football on your staff. You don't win without talent, and you don't win a lot of games without top talent. So that's basically the end of the Florida State segment. I don't know if you have anything else to really go over, but I think we covered pretty much everything on that end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we have. And, Florida State's still a work in progress, man. And, speaking of a work in progress, we're going to go to a lesser work in progress. Next, we talk about Miami's transfers. They don't have as many, but the ones that they have are high quality. Be back. All right, we're going down to Miami for their transfer class. Miami didn't have a lot of holes. When you look at that team, their biggest hole was obviously going to be a defensive line. So offensive, they got a ton of pieces returning. So, Fish, tell me about their transfer class.
I mean, heck, like this is the first time probably in like forever, like every underclassman that could declare for the draft all decided to come back for another year. So like that's one thing that Manny, I got to tell you, he did something that every other coach has had. I mean, like Miami's had guys that weren't even like drafted that left early, that didn't even have a draftable grade, leave early. And this year they've done a great job of, getting D'Eriq King back. They got the offensive tackle back from Houston. So they didn't have as many pieces that they had to fill. They had a situation at DN, like they didn't need to bring in a grad transfer, but they bring DeAndre Johnson in, who played a lot of snaps at University of Tennessee, local kid, played at Southridge, played at Killian, I believe. But, the big one they got was Tyrique Stevenson. I mean, that solidifies, we talked about it. Miami's done a phenomenal job recruiting every position except DB. I don't know how it's happened. I mean, there's Hall of Famers coming out of South Florida. They've had the elite of the elite DBs come out, from Asante Samuel to Patrick Surtain to the Campbell kid to Josh Jobe to Tyrique Stevenson. Like, all these kids were in their backyard, and they've done a good job with the other positions in their backyard. But these kids were leaving in droves, and Miami just got back that shutdown corner, that guy that, and he struggled early on, but he showed in their bowl game that Tyrique Stevenson is probably going to be one of the best DBs in the ACC next year. I think he's going to end up making a major impact. He allows you to basically put him man coverage against some other team's top receiver. And now you could do stuff on the other side with your coverages when you have a guy like this. And, we've talked about it. They're adding a James Williams to that safety spot. They've got dudes. And, you look at that, and then A major weak spot for them is wide receiver. We saw the wide receiver position lost them their bowl game.
Yeah.
And, how many drops did they have from Pope and Wiggins? And what's crazy is these kids put up nice stats this year, but they did not. It's like they went small and disappeared when they needed them. If you look at their stats in ball games, I mean, Pope and Wiggins would have 100, 75, 80, 100-yard games, but when they mattered most, they came up small. And the Rambo kid gives them a guy that played in a pass-happy offense. He was given a lot of opportunities. I think he may help them solidify a position that's been kind of a weak spot the last couple of years at Miami.
Yeah, I mean, when you look, you're looking exactly at that. DB was an issue where they needed a lot of help. They get a 5-star talented shutdown corner who, and the great thing about Stevenson, even though he had a bad year at Georgia played him in a lot of different positions. He can do a lot more. You're going to put him out there on the outside. You're going to put him out there on an island. But, you're talking about when you get into sub packages, he's a kid that can give you a lot of versatility. And I think that's one thing that he'll appreciate as he goes on in his career. Like you said, the wide receiver position, they need guys that can catch football. That's just more than anything. These are guys that can catch. I mean, so the things they didn't need a lot, in spite of that, they filled all their major holes. And that's why they're going to be one of the favorites to win the ACC. And now, we're going to pretty much end this like we started it. Miami versus Alabama opens your season in Atlanta.
Well, listen, I'm going to bring up one other thing. We talked about coaching. Miami got rid of Blake Baker this week.
Oh, yeah.
And Blake Baker on a Miami message board is like Rick Trickett. I mean, their fans hated this guy. I never met him, but I mean, I think they were jumping for, I've never seen a fan base hate a coach so much. Like this guy must have lost a lot of Miami fans over under bets. Like he lost a lot of unders and he lost a lot of money on the spread because this guy is the most hated Miami coach of all time. I mean, I think he's ahead of Coker. There's not a coach that Al Golden got off the top spot as most hated coach. I mean, Blake Baker is hated by Miami fans, but on the other end, they brought in one of the message board, every message board in the state of Florida, whether it's Florida State, Florida, Miami, the favorite son, Tavares Robinson, got hired by University of Miami. We discussed this a little about with Manny Navarro in our last podcast. What do I have a lot of history with T-Rob. I've known the guy. I think the first time I met him, he was at Western Kentucky, and then he worked his way up to Southern Miss. And then, he worked his way up. If there was a coach that literally started at the bottom and worked his way up, and now he's considered one of the top, recruiters in the country. He's considered one of the top DB coaches. How big of a get is this for University of Miami?
I think it's huge because he's been so good as a recruiter down in South Florida. It gives you a guy that can literally get the top kids out of the backyard. Players love him. I think he's been in some good situations for him. He's been in some situations that didn't work out for him, but I think he's a good coach. I think he can get you top talent. I think he can get you top local talent. And those are the things that when you're at Miami, those really check off the major boxes. You want a guy that can come in there, that can get you the top talent, that can keep the top talent staying home. And T-Rob can do that. And I remember when he took the job, it was just that's a job where there were a lot of rumblings after he took it because people realized, wow, recruiting in South Florida got a little bit more difficult.
Well, the one thing too, Corey, and this is Miami seems like the stepping stone job. Good coaches leave here. It's not often that Miami's got one of the top SEC coaches that's leaving that conference. And yeah, it wasn't on his own. He didn't want to leave South Carolina, but now he comes to Miami. They beat out a lot of teams, I'm sure, for his services. And he probably took less pay.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably took a little bit less money, but I think for him, it's a good career move because this place fits all of his strengths. It fits his strengths as a coach, his strengths as a recruiter, and his strengths in developing players. So sometimes I think you have to take that step back sometimes and move a couple steps forward. And I find this to be it's great for Miami, it's great for T. Rob, and I think I think it's going to be a beneficial relationship for as long as it lasts. I don't expect him to be there forever. Let's be honest. Once he has some success there's going to be a program that's going to offer him a lot more money. And only, at the end of the day, if you ain't in this to make money, you're in it for the wrong reason. So, you know, you got to do
The
what you
SEC just got $75 million for each school TV wise. So like any of these schools in that SEC West, they lose a coach. T. Rob's going to be at the top of their list.
Exactly, and until that happens, this is a perfect spot for him. So I'm excited to see what he does in Miami.
Well, that's the end of this one, and we discussed the Miami Hurricanes. Up next is the University of Central Florida, and we're going to talk about their new head coach or whoever is going to be the head coach or the options they got. It's we've discussed it before, it's one of the best jobs in not only the state of Florida, but the country. We'll be back on the other end. In segment 3, we're going to discuss the University of Miami football Hurricanes.
All right, so the coaching carousel never ends, and this time it hits us close to home. Danny White, the UCF AD, takes the job at Tennessee, and unsurprisingly, a few days later decides to hire Josh Heupel to be his new head coach. Heupel will take pretty much his entire offensive staff with him to Tennessee. So UCF is open, looking for a coach, likely looking for one with an offensive background and someone that could come in there and he's gonna have to rebuild his staff at least on one side of the ball. The only potential for an internal hire I see is Randy Shannon, but I think that's a program that is gonna consistently look for offensive coaches because that's what's worked for them. Coaches that to coach the offense. Jeff Lebby, the OC at Ole Miss, has gotten a lot of positive run. Current players and former players seem to be very high on him. I think James Coley, the offensive coordinator at Texas A&M, is a very interesting fit there with his ability to recruit in South Florida, really recruit all over the state. I think he's an interesting fit there. There are other names out there. What is there a name that sticks out to you in particular?
Well, before I get into this, all right, I have an idea. Me and you are going to start a consultant firm tomorrow because some consultant firm just stole money from Tennessee. like I don't know the name of them, but they were hired to find a coach in Tennessee. They hired this consultant firm after Danny White got hired, only to hire a coach he already knew.
Yeah.
Like how does these consultant firms even cash that check? It's like straight robbery.
I don't know how these search firms do it, but we got to figure this out. We got to.
Corey, we only need like 5 schools a year that we could swindle for about 80 to 100 grand each. And we don't have to work, but what, 3 or 4 months of the year?
Yeah.
I'm sure we could put together a Rolodex of some coaches that we like, hey man, here's a name. It's going to cost you 100 grand. 100 grand they pay for this. And Tennessee hires an AD and who the coach hires a guy. He just hired a UCF. Straight robber. Like Tennessee should ask for stop payment. Like, is Bank of America going to stop payment on that check? Because that's straight robbery. If you and I did that, we'd be in jail. It's like, it should be fraud.
That's insider trading if there ever was something. Oh my God.
So as far as I'm concerned, you know who I think they should hire. And we've already discussed this, and you said there's a lot of stench with the name. I think they should hire Kendall Briles. I think they should.
I did not say there's a lot of stench with it. I said that I said that he unfortunately is broad. The name is Briles is not a good name right now. And I think he's better off where he is. Just kind of, you have to let things die down.
But he's been at 4 schools since that's happened. I mean, he's FAU, Houston.
Here's the problem. His dad's name is still out there.
Well, he's going to sign. He may end up at Liberty one day, and then God can forgive him.
If his dad goes to Liberty, that's going to put Kendall back another 5 years.
Oh my God!
All he's going to do is hear about his dad some more. Oddly enough, Jeff Levy and Kendall Briles are related by marriage, or brother-in-law.
And they both were on that Baylor staff together, by the way.
Everybody on that Baylor staff not named Briles is doing okay.
Pretty much. No, actually, the defensive coordinator, but I don't think it was. I think that has more to do with the guy wasn't a good coach.
Yeah.
I don't think it had anything to do with the Baylor situation. But I'm a big fan of Briles. I've gotten in this argument with a ton of people that his offense won't work. Well, his offense did pretty good last year at Arkansas. I agree.
Concerns about his offense.
Yeah, I mean, Levy's a great option. There is a name out there. I mean, there's a couple other guys. I mean, Lincoln Riley's brother, Garrett Riley, had a very good year at SMU, lit it up there. And the one guy, there's a mummy at University of Nevada, and I know that'd be outside the box, but these are guys that all have high octane offenses. They have put up monster numbers. Lincoln Riley's brother doesn't have the same, pedigree and name recognition because he's kind of flown under the radar, but SMU put up monster stats this year. And, if you're going to go after an offensive coach, why not go after these guys that have put up stats? I mean, maybe even Rhett Lashley at Miami, he'd be an option that
Rhett would be a heck of an option.
I mean, he's coached in the Southeast and he's already has recruiting, he has a recruiting print in the state of Florida. He knows how to recruit Florida kids. And the one thing, UCF, we've talked about this. I remember going all the way back when we first started talking about UCF and, they built the on-campus stadium and the on-campus facility. They have made football exciting. Even when they lose games, they don't lose ugly. The games aren't 17-10. This isn't, the last time they had an ugly loss was when O'Leary decided to say something in the locker room that pissed off 85 players, and they gave up about a 28-point lead at halftime and got beat by like 3 touchdowns. I mean, that's the last time UCF got blown out. I mean, it's a great program, but you could see it this year, and we've talked about it. They kind of got away from the things that made it a great program, and they could get it right back. I don't think it's going to be hard there's enough talent there to win 8-9 games here next year. They got their quarterback coming back. They just need to hit the reset button. I don't think they're heading in the wrong direction. They needed a reset thing. Heupel, it was right. We thought Heupel should have left last year. And I remember you talked about it, that really he was a year too late on it because it's just hard to maintain at those programs. Like you're recruiting 3-star, people talk about 2- and 3-star kids. You got to hit on so many kids every year, and you're going to have a bad, you're not going to maintain it at USF or UCF or FIU or FAU. You could have a 10-11 win season, and then you're going to have a dip to 6-6 or 7-5. You don't want to have those bad seasons, but I do think it's a little harder to maintain than it is at FSU or Miami or Florida.
And and Josh Heupel he didn't really like recruiting. I mean, we've met him. He's a nice guy, but he's not a commanding personality. He doesn't have much of a presence about him. He strictly likes coaching quarterbacks. He likes calling plays, And I think that's good for Tennessee. They need somebody that doesn't necessarily he doesn't want to be all up in the video. They need somebody that can kind of reorganize that.
Dude, when they score Corey, when they score like 20 in a game next year, their fans are going to celebrate because they were playing like Woody Hayes style football. They didn't realize you have to score.
Yeah.
Even in the SEC, you got to score to win ball games. I'm like, do they realize 14 ain't going to get it done at Tennessee?
Yeah, exactly. What they were doing what they were doing with that Earl Bruce style they were running there was just not. It was not really complimenting anybody.
And then on top of it, you put Giarratano in 3rd and 18, which he can't throw 5 yards, let alone 25 yards.
You can almost mark down the turnover coming before it came, really, with that situation. I look at this and I'm like, this is it was a win-win for everybody. It was a win for Heupel that he was still able to get an SEC job. It's a win for UCF because now I think they can get back to the success, to the type of hire they had when they hired Scott Frost. Somebody that's really excited about recruiting and the players in the state of Florida and winning with them. And I think, that could be Levy, that could be Rhett Lashley, that could be Kendall Browse, that could be James Coley, that could be somebody else out there. But whoever they do has got to be somebody that's really excited about having a program with very good resources that pays well in the epicenter of recruiting, basically.
Scott
take advantage of that.
Yeah, the reason that Scott Frost had so much success in recruiting is he didn't care if a kid was 5'6", 5'7". If he could run and he could make plays, he's like, heck, man, these guys are going to outrun everybody in this conference. So that's what they got to get back to that. That's why UCF was so good, is their guys were high octane guys that just, they could take the ball a 10-yard hitch route and go 100 yards for a touchdown. I mean, that's what they recruited, and they need to get back to that. And I think Levy or any of these offensive coordinators that we named, now, if Randy does get the job, he's going to have to go out and hire an offensive coordinator and just say, hey, listen, man, you run the offense. I'm just going to concentrate on the defense and be a CEO of this team. And, he did coach at Miami. I'm sure he's learned some lessons. So it could always, if he gets an offensive coordinator, I think he could have success. But it is a great program, and I want them to be good because I think they're exciting to watch.
Oh, I agree. I think they're exciting to watch. I think what we saw at USF under Jeff Scott, they're heading on the right track. And when both of these, rarely have both of these programs been good at the same time. It happened 2-3 years ago in the year that UCF went undefeated. I think USF finished 10-2 that year. And that game on Thanksgiving Friday was the best game of the season. Yep. It was incredible to watch both of those teams. So I want both of them to be good. And I feel like, USF made the right hire. I'd love to see Tony Elliott swallow his pride and maybe take this UCF job. I know he's been waiting for quote-unquote big jobs, but they're all gone. And really, to me, he could go to UCF. He could win 20 games in 2 seasons and put himself out there if he wanted to again. So,
and you look at this job, it's already shown. Like, if you win there, you're going to get a big-time job. I mean, Tennessee and Nebraska are big-time jobs.
Yeah, it is a springboard job if there ever was one. It is the best job in Power 5 as far as I'm concerned.
Tony Elliott, I'm calling you later. Take the darn job. Have your agent call. Listen, this ain't New Mexico.
But hire us as a search firm first.
Yeah, we're gonna hire us first. Give us $100,000, and then we'll name you coach.
We'll name you coach. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, Corey, it was great being back. Back on here with you, and I enjoyed it a lot. Hey, listen, let me throw out the Twitter handle real quick, how people could follow us on the Mac and Fish, or Fish and Mac, or Fish and Corey, or whatever other show. I mean, we're gonna have to get to the point where we change this thing every week now.
They can reach me at Corey Long, COREYLONG, because I was one of the early Twitterers, so I got my name on there without having a number or a hashtag or a underscore or anything next to it.
Oh man, I'm trying to find the hashtag for the Fish and Mac podcast, but you can follow us on Twitter. I believe it's just Mac and Fish podcast, so at Mac and Fish. So like I said, I had a great time with you. I thought this one went really quick, and we discussed a lot of great subjects. I'm sorry that you had to hear about a 20-minute conversation with my son's Little League baseball coach, but had to be done. Little Ethan, I got to take care of him, but we look forward to talking again next week. And hey, all you fans out there, hit us up. Make sure you give us a 5-star review. I'm sucking up to you guys like everybody else that does these podcasts. And we're out, man. Have another great week, guys.
Take care.